is here. Be like, hey, good morning. They can talk into this, right? And this is a decent test. So that's okay. All right. We'll always have a backup plan if we need that. Like, I just always create the contingency, right? So we have all these extra SM58s, like, ready to go. We just turn the signal on. They're wired. They're ready to go. In case the wireless fails, we can just go, here you go. Instead of freaking out on the fly. Oh, my God, we got to run the cable. And then it's like an inconvenience is the It's, were you at the FunCon on Friday? It's like the same thing, only different people. Yeah. It's not the senior VP.
can speak some strange things and question the world. Like yesterday I saw Kermit the Frog on a FedEx truck. Why? Who knows? It was just like, the poor Kermit was like 4 arms and like, what's that new movie that came out about Kermit? And he goes to prison? Muppets Most Wanted. It looked like Kermit got thrown onto an ice wall, except it was in the front of the truck and he got run over. That's what it looked like. But yeah, totally. I like the world. The world likes me. Today, I don't know. I'm so tired. I did all my homework last night. That's so proud. Yay! Clap. I was here until 8:30, 8:49-ish. I was here late. Me and Herman were here late doing a lot of work. And doing this. I know, right? I'll be here forever. And then Casey, we didn't get a weekend. Or I at least didn't get a weekend. So I get to come back here tomorrow and go to class. Woo! Am I still spitting clean bars here? Okay. Is it working? Oh, yeah, I hear my voice, but it's up to my mouth, Mr. Harmon, so that could be an issue. When it should be like this, can you kind of hear me? There's a lot of feedback. I like strawberries. And there was okay, I'm still stuck on the fact there was a Kermit on a FedEx truck. Why the heck was there a Kermit on a FedEx truck? That doesn't make sense to me. FedEx truck. I see a FedEx truck with the Kermit frog. And it's really awkward when you're here at 9 o'clock at night and you see that. I mean, I could imagine it in the morning, but not at night. Feedback from that. Casey wore a dress at 7 a.m. in the morning. We should clap her up because it's cold outside. It's cold outside. Called. Can we spit weird fire? Ready? I don't know what I'm doing. Hi, Mr. Lehman. Hi, Chris. How's the world? Can you hear me? I think you can hear me when I'm like this. This is
Do you
my
hear it?
strawberries. I really want a bagel. I would like breakfast. Starbucks is good.
So this morning I had to walk 10 blocks to get the only bus in my neighborhood, and I missed it by 5 minutes. And then SEPTA made the next bus late. No, the good conclusion is I'm here at EduCon.
I'm gonna fall off the stage. Do you hear my lovely voice saying some magical things?
Can you hear us, Miranda?
Hello. Hello, Miss Hall. I like your setup.
Can you hear us?
Can you hear me? Can you hear my wonderful voice?
Can you hear it?
Is it that bad?
Miranda
Oh
can't
no.
hear us in the back. Herman.
You're also standing behind people who are talking to you.
Herman.
Can you hear me?
us now?
You can hear me? But it's very in and out.
Well, tell Herman though. He's adjusting the levels.
We just don't want feedback tonight.
Miranda, go tell him.
Hello, everybody. I keep having to adjust where my mic is, because this isn't working.
Huh? I'm on. Hello. 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 Well, you shouldn't have to be bending down. Huh? I'm hot.
Mike's hot.
Here comes the next piece of the stage.
That's a dangerous idea, you guys. Just pointing that out. People in the back are doing so much hard work.
Why didn't they take it down the elevator?
No, because
No,
the
the
wooden
wooden
you
ones
can't. They're too
can't.
fat. They don't fit in.
That's terrifying.
It is.
So the
We already-
wooden ones are
we
the
have-
only ones that have to go down the stairs.
Why is it yours?
Wait,
seems
why are we
louder?
doing the wooden one?
I don't know.
we
If
No, it's too. Yeah. Promise this is too thin. Can I go? Alright. I want to tell my story. Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me? Alright, so here's my story. Alright? I'll wait. Hello? Oh my god. Oy. There you go. Is that yours? Is it good? So, okay. So, huh? How many what? No. So, my story is, there was a Dollar Boy party.
So we need you. Everyone that's got a mic, you gotta keep talking. Just keep talking.
Got it. So, there was a party by the Dollar Boy.
Okay.
So, I went to the Dollar Boy
Guys, you're
party.
gonna put that.
Who's there in full form. So we went to the party, and it was great. There was Kool-Aid, jam, the little package that you can drink in 2 seconds. So we drank those, and the intermission was fun. And so the moral of the story is, don't let the protagonist steal the story, because. I think that when you multiply 2 and pi together, it's like it's 2 pies, but it's also it's too much food, and I feel like
Everyone that's on a mic,
no,
just
you
keep
can't have
talking.
one of the
Don't
pies
stop.
because that seems very selfish. So I will have both of the pies and give
Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2. But it's not until when you get out there is when it goes crazy, right? Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2. Mic check. Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2. Mic check. Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2. Mic check.
Good morning, everybody. It is 9 o'clock. How is everybody? Hi, and you can hear me now, right, everybody? How about back there? Anyone back there? Moms? SLA parents, can you hear me? That's great. That's really good. I like that you can hear me. That's exciting. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day. It is Tuesday. Hello. Hello. Hi, Kevin. Are you okay? Welcome to EduCon. Have you done this before? Yeah. So yeah, how is everybody? It's the morning. It looks like. And I say Christmas trees. I don't know. N-
But wait, Matt, what about this?
That's what you mean by adjust the height. Can I adjust the height by that or
Hello. Hello.
Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2. Mic check 1 2. Yeah, so could you go over there for me? Yeah, I need 4 batteries.
How's this? Okay. You good now? How's it? Good levels? What? Oh, sorry. So everyone. What? Okay. How is it? How's it going? Can everyone hear me? Hey. Hey, Nabil, can you hear me back there? Okay, good.
Testing, testing, testing. Good morning. Hey, we've been here since 5:45. Testing, testing. Morning, Chris. How are you doing? Get your bagel?
1, 2.
The muffin?
Check.
All right.
Check.
It's more than I've had.
Check. 1, 2. Check. 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 Mic check. Check.
All
Check.
right.
Check. 1, 2.
This is a decent
Check.
height.
Check. Mic check.
Lehman height. All right. This is going to be top heavy. That's going
Check.
to tilt.
Check. Check. 1, 2. Check. Mic.
What?
Check. Check.
It's not, but
Check.
they never do. And then
Check.
they're always like, blah, blah, blah,
Check
blah.
on the
and you
mic.
hear nothing on the live stream, right?
Check. 1, 2. Check. Check. Okay. Okay. Hi. Check. Check. 1, 2. Check. 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 1, 2. Check. Check. 1, 2. Check. Check. 1, 2. Still checking the mic. Check. 1, 2. Check. Check. 1, 2. Check. Check.
Mic check 1, 2. Mic check 1, 2. This is the loudest mic in here. Mic check 1, 2. Mic check 1, 2. Mic check. Mic check 1, 2. Mic check 1, 2. Mic check. All right, so
All right. So,
The moral of the story is that we, and yeah, exactly. So to make America great again, huh? All right. So to make America great again, we must invest in the future, and the future is Jesus and Dollar Boys. I can't sit down because of this, so I'm gonna put this in my pocket. So the key to success, it's a major key, is to eat your bagels and drink your coffee in the morning because it helps drink water. Always drink water is a major key. I drink water lion. Bless up. That's also a major key to success. Make sure to eat your vitamins and eat applesauce. Applesauce really helps. It's very nutritious and it works. Life and death and the middle life and the middle death, it all coincides. And to make America great again, we know we have to think of the consequences of what we face. And to do that, we must always conduct experiments. So always eat applesauce. Do you eat or drink applesauce? Because it is a liquid.
Testing, testing. Level 6, level 6. My voice is deeper than the moderator, so you're going to have to bring me up because she's going to be a little bit lighter. Testing, testing, testing. Probably get me to a pretty high level. Testing, testing. Maybe a little higher than this. We'll change it on the fly, but to start, we should be. That's good. That's good there. What? feel okay? You're talking here. Dan, do me a favor, sit in this chair. Let's chat. That looks good. That looks good. Does it feel comfortable that you're looking at me with that position, or do you need to turn your chair a little to be able? We might have a call, 10-minute conversation like this. That's better? All right, cool. Thank you. Try the middle. That's good. Okay, that's good. Last one. That's good. comfortable? Ready to go?
Horrible.
We got 15-year-olds live streaming, guys. Chill.
Yeah.
What? Hi, Lauren.
Have a great one.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Happy Sunday of EduCon. I hope you've all enjoyed the conversations in and out of sessions over the past couple of days. I would like to begin this morning by thanking the folks who make all of this possible, beginning with Z Driggers, our incredible home and school coordinator, and all of the parents who have volunteered their weekend hours. A huge shout out also goes out to Jasmine Gilliam and Kevin Bowser, the student co-chairs for this conference, and the other countless students that you've been seeing around the building for all of their hard work. Many thanks to Marcy Hull, Tim Best, Doug Herman, and the Rough Cut crew, BJ Ensweiler and Diana Laufenberg, for everything that they do. And finally, a special thank you to Chris Lehman for the immense work, really all year round, that goes into this. It truly is a labor of love to make this happen. We are always honored and humbled that you come here every year and engage in the learning alongside us. Thank you. Thank you for being here, coming to our Quirky Conference, held in our little school on a weekend in January. And on that note, I want you to get your phones out and your other tiny robots and mark the dates for next year's conference, which are EduCon 2017 will be January 27th, 28th, and 29th. Get excited. All right, a couple of housekeeping items before I introduce. Presenters, if you have not been receiving your presenter gifts, please do stop by the EduConcierge later on today to pick them up. The students are dropping them off like sneaky ninjas during your session, so if you miss them for some reason, please do check in with us and make sure you get your gift. There still will be books for sale on the second floor, as well as EduCon t-shirts, which are lovely and really soft, and I would encourage you to check them out. Student raffles will still be happening throughout the day. And I do have some raffle winners from yesterday who did not pick up their gifts, so if you're here, please check in with me in a bit. I have Helen Huang Hobbs, Jack Marmo, I'm sorry, I can't read it, Jack M, Brian Marr, and T. Myers. If you are here, please find me. Okay. We are really excited about this morning's panel. The Friday night panel is about the way the conference theme plays out, in society. And this morning we're going to turn to the ideas of empowerment and how they play out in schools. We have an amazing panel of educators to think about this question, and the panel will be moderated by Christine Weiser, who is the editor of Tech and Learning magazine. Christine.
Hello, good morning, everybody. Welcome back, and thanks also again to Chris and the whole SLA team for doing this every year. It's an awesome conference. So today we're going to tackle the enormous topic, what conditions are necessary for empowerment in schools? So it's a big one, and we've got some great people here to answer some questions. We want to hear from you as well. Just for audio purposes, we're thinking what we did in the earlier panels, we do again here. If you have questions, tweet them out using the hashtag EduCon, and then I will follow the feed up here, and then I'll ask the questions that come up. Our panel this morning, we have Laura Shubilla, co-founder of Building 21. Unfortunately, Diane from Philly was sick, so thankfully Matt Kay, founding English teacher here at SLA, has stepped in for Diane. Thank you. And then we have Carlos Moreno, the executive director from Big Picture Learning. So I thought we'd start the conversation by asking this question about how each of our panelists define empowered learning, and then maybe you can put that in context of your work and what you strive to do as far as empowering schools that you work with. You want to start, Laura?
Yes. So good morning, everybody. I'm really happy to be here with you. It's a lot of pressure to go first with this esteemed panel, but I've been thinking a lot about this question and this panel. Not, I've been thinking about it, I think, my whole career, but in particular as the lead up to the panel. And I love the way the question is framed, because I do think empowerment is about a set of conditions. And when I think about conditions for empowerment, I think about two things first. I think about the existence of hope, and I think about the existence of capacity. And to me, those are two necessary conditions for empowerment. People have to be hopeful. They have to find hope in themselves, and they have to feel hopeful about their circumstances and their future. And then capacity, to me, is about mindsets and skills, and being able to have the capacity to act on that hope. And when I was thinking about how I would define empowerment, I looked empowerment up in the dictionary, and I thought it was really interesting, and probably something else we should talk about, because when you look at the word empowerment, it is about the act of giving power. And I think when we have to pause on that for a minute and ask ourselves, what does that even mean? Because if empowerment is the act of giving power, then I think we have to pause on that and say, what does it mean about our schools and our society that some people have power and some people don't, and some people have the privilege to give power, and other people who should just have power have to wait till it's given. And so you can't talk about empowerment without talking about race and class, and I think we have to ask ourselves, what are the conditions that exist in our school? Because by definition, if you have people who are underempowered, you have people who are overempowered. And you can't fix a system without solving both sides of that equation.
Thank you, Laura. Matt, you want to take the
Yes.
question?
I don't normally, or at least I try to avoid, battles over semantics among people of goodwill. Empowered, but I do think if I'm asked how that phrase applies to my life and my students' lives, my mentees' lives, I don't think, well, in our nonprofit we say that we help youth discover the power of their voices. And I don't want to talk about whether or not we give power, whether or not they already have power, but I think we do have to a little bit realize the fact that our students are incredibly powerful already. And there's all sorts of systems and structures that are set up to push that power down and to convince them that they don't, to convince them that other people need to create situations and stuff like that. Whereas any student of any civil rights movement or things like that, we know that these things start and really get effective when people are just acting in their power already. When students are walking out, when students are sitting in, when students are doing these kind of things, and they're not waiting for someone else from the outside to empower them. They have some conditions have been set for them to know their power and act and walk and act and speak in that power. So I do think that sometimes we can waste our time in semantic debates among people of goodwill, but I do think that that is worth really teasing out because we're of goodwill. Not just the conditions that you mentioned, but also how are we convincing the kids that they already have power? And it's not our classroom that's doing it or our school that's doing it. They are powerful inherently because they're human and because they're smart and because they're passionate and all of those other things.
Thank you. Carlos?
So good morning again, everyone. Happy to be here with you all. I think when it comes to empowerment, there's this kind of make you feel good assumption that empowerment is the act of kind of gaining knowledge and understanding for a lot of folks. And in many ways, I may be preaching to the choir here. because we're all here on this lovely Sunday at EduCon in Philadelphia engaged in this important conversation. But the reality is, I think, to Laura's point, is that empowerment for way too many people in our society, in schools, is around moving from weakness to strength and operating under the assumption that when we talk about our students, that they're starting from a place of weakness. And that's just a falsehood. So we need to absolutely consider looking at those talents and strengths that our students show up to our doors with, starting from that point. Not talk about what are their weaknesses or their challenges, but what are they actually capable of? Because they're capable of quite a bit, as we know. I wanted to use a real life example as I was sitting there watching these amazing students tackle on, I don't know how many of you were watching this, a real problem without really adult supervision in making this stage work. No one was, they had some, just, hey, we need to get it right, but they figured it out. They were empowered. They said, and this is real. This is not for, a class, or this is real life, real scenario. And they were completely empowered, and I chose to sit on this side because I really want to make sure it was right. Go hold me, it's good. It'll hold up, right? So, I think, just diving into just, my work and our work as educators and education leaders, at Big Picture, we begin with students and their strengths and their talents, and really try to create that program, that curriculum, those learning experiences around those, with the understanding that a lot of their challenges and the other pieces will become addressed over time, or diminished to the point where they become insignificant, but really important to begin with those student strengths. And quite honestly, empowerment is an underpinning for equity, which is the hot and sexy word right now in education. It's about education equity. Everywhere you go, everyone's talking about equity, equity, equity. But really it starts with empowerment.
Fantastic, thank you. We talked a little bit before the panel about what sort of cultural conditions need to exist, because there are a lot of systemic forces in place oftentimes that prevent that sort of autonomy that you're talking about by the student. So I wonder if maybe you could each talk about work that you've done with schools where you've been able to realize systemic change. Sort of what were the conditions in place there that allowed that to happen, or maybe didn't, So Laura, you want to start with that? You had brought this up earlier.
So there are so many ways, I think, to go at that question. I think in Philadelphia right now, we're in a system that is incredibly under-resourced. And regardless of, what the arguments people have about funding, I think being in a school every day, it's hard to argue that we have the resources, all the resources that we need to do what we need to do. So on any given day, and I feel like we've gotten pretty good in our system here of saying, what can we do in spite of? What can we do in spite of? And not using it as an excuse to do the work we need to be doing every day. But, I think we've reached rock bottom with that. And then I also think about, just the human aspect of your question. And for us in our school with Building 21, we spend a lot of time just talking about the power of relationships and what it means to be known, because one of the most disempowering things is to be invisible. And I think that's true for teachers and for students and for administrators. And so building on a core value that how do you actually get people to see each other as human beings on a daily basis? And I think sometimes schools get very good at dehumanizing people, which is really ironic given that education is really first and foremost about finding humanity, finding power, understanding who we are as individuals. And so trying in every way that we can to make sure nobody feels alone and nobody feels invisible, I think is one of the ways that we talk about this every day in our school.
So who are some of the most powerful voices that you've experienced in your work with different schools?
With schools and...
As far as making cultural changes. Is it top down? Have you seen cases of bottom up working?
Oh, for sure. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I think the only way this happens in some, there's this tension exists at every level of the system, and so I think there's work to be done at every level of the system. But being able to start with students and have students be able to understand their dreams and their interests and their passions and be able to feel like they are in a place where they can voice those and there's actually a path for them to do something about it, I think is, and then having to think about what does that mean for our school. It's really challenging then for the adults and, for us as a school to say if we're going to take this seriously and kids are going to come to us and believe that we mean what we say, what does that mean for how we run our school? Because you can't then run the school the way we're used to running the school if you're serious about having students be able to drive their own learning.
Great. Matt, you want to talk a little bit about what that model looks like here at SLA and how it works? How just empowerment from the autonomy that I see existing with the students, with the teachers, and is that possible to scale it to a larger school?
Is it possible to scale it to a larger school?
Yeah.
I think there's going to be, like with everything, larger, smaller, different populations of kids, there's going to be adjustments that are going to need to be made regardless. But I think, and I'm sure you made it this far in the weekend, you've heard about like the core values and the common language on the rubrics and all of the things that you've already heard about the school. And I think all I would add to that, just so I don't repeat it again, is that how important it is for all of those systems to be openly communicated to the kids. To the point where they make core value jokes. To the point where they, but it's where it's not some secret club of adults in the building that speak the language. But if everyone in the building speaks the language, it can be so much powerful and scary, I would imagine, because if they know about our systems, they can hold us accountable to those systems. I know, for example, I'll say, if I ever assign a project and I don't show you the rubric first, I need you to tell me. Don't let me be lazy. And once students can speak rubric, and it's not some secret code they can speak and say, well, Mr. K, I don't understand why my process grade, why my knowledge grade, why my application grade, because this is how I'm seeing it. How did you see it? Especially in a subjective, I mean English, I teach kids English, sorry. And so that the fact that I am not afraid to go back and forth and justify my reasoning, and I'm open for them to justify their reasoning, it can be scary, I can imagine. I mean, I'm not afraid of it, but I can imagine how it could be scary if they can speak the same language that we do. So I'd say with all of the things that you're hearing, I would say make sure when you go home, a big part of what you're talking about would be openly communicating those things to the kids. Because I guess the real power would be, can they go up to you with the rubric and challenge you? And I think that's, of all the things, you know the systems. But.
Yeah, that's great. And Carlos, you talked about, you saw models of students. So what, in the schools where you've seen this working well, what would you say were some of the, maybe the leadership perspectives, what were some of the cultural roles in those schools that you feel like helped to make this work?
So I think in terms of, there are obviously various levels. So I think school leaders need to be empowered to be able to be visionaries and create those conditions that allow students to thrive, have voice, and kind of learn in a real authentic way. Teachers, right, need to be allowed, need to have that power, need to be empowered, since we're going with that thread, to be able to not purely be the deliverers of content, right, but facilitators of conversations, the facilitators of learning. And at the core of that, absolutely, we have to have the students have very powerful voice in that work. And really beginning with the, again, with the students' interests, figuring out who are the students, really knowing your students well. I think for us, we hone in on our 3 R's, which are relationships, relevance, and rigor, and really in that order, recognizing that before you can truly work with young people and teach young people and empower young people, you really need to know them and their full context, not just how they can perform academically, right? So what are their talents, strengths, challenges, families, communities are really important. I think we see ourselves really as, historically, as a kind of that intermediary that helps support those type of conditions within schools. But even more so now, I think of the connectors and bringing folks together to help amplify the volume of this type of learning that's happening everywhere, right? So not just big picture schools, but how do we start talking more about the Building 21s, the SLAs, the El Centro de Estudiantes, the workshop schools, all these other schools that are doing it, to those folks that are making the decisions, that have put up the policies and the barriers that don't allow us to do this and learn deeply and allow students to learn deeply. I think it's an ongoing challenge, and quite honestly, the fact of the matter is, everyone's not about that life, as the students say, right? They're just not, right? Especially oftentimes these decision makers, they're just not about that. But I think that without question, it's big picture can't do it alone. SLA can't do it alone. There needs to be more collective voices in that work.
Great, thank you. Well, I'm going to throw this out to you. Show of hands, how many of you feel you work in a district where your students are really empowered? Wow. Can someone take a picture of that? Okay. How about your teachers? Are you working in an environment where your teachers are really empowered? Better? Okay. And how many, off the record, how many feel like they have a school leadership who supports change and the kind of models we're talking about here? Okay. Good answer with your Boston right there, Matt. Excellent. Okay, well, I think that gives us a little litmus test of of the kind of challenges we're talking about here, because it's great to empower students. We want that to happen, but what can we do in our roles as teachers, as educators, as administrators? What can we do? So maybe can we take a few minutes and you guys maybe talk about what you have done to help make these changes in schools you've worked with?
Well, I think we have tried to, transparency is a huge core value of ours, and so I think the first thing we've done is to try to be really clear about what our values are and how we're living them out every day, and to try to create an environment where people can have real conversations and be very thoughtful about how we handle conflict, because I think one of the ways you see people and systems empowered or disempowered, where it plays out on a day-to-day basis, is how conflicts get handled, and whether it's perceived as small conflicts or big conflicts of values, how do they get discussed, who has the power to resolve those problems. And I think the more people buy into the fact that there is actually a real system in place and a real space for honest conversations to happen, and that we're going to live our values. I mean, it's hard. When you're doing this kind of work, you are failing if you are doing it well at times. And students, we say to our students, failure is part of learning. But when you're in a system that is incredibly, the accountability and kind of compliance structures of our system are not very tolerant of failure. And so it takes a lot of courage to actually be able to sit in a space and say to people, we are only going to push our own learning if we're right at that edge. People always talk about like the learning edge, and I always say to people, let's make sure we're on the edge and not the ledge, right? And it's a fine line between those two things. Like, how do you stay on the edge and off the ledge? And there are a lot of days when I feel like I'm on the ledge, right? Because you aren't sure if you're pushing too far. You aren't sure how much failure can actually be tolerated by anybody, right? By the system, by teachers, by kids. And so I think being able to create a holding environment where people know that they can talk honestly about these things, and that there will be a space for authentic communication, and you can be vulnerable and you can talk about how you're feeling, I think goes a long way to create that kind of culture. And so that is, I think, the thing we are working on the most, is making sure that we have a holding space to tolerate the work that we're doing, and the challenges that it brings on any given day.
And before you take that question, I want to add on to that, because we did get a question that says, in a culture of fear and no job security, how can school leaders feel empowered? Because there's a lot at stake. When your school is rolling along, it's okay, you're getting the funding. How do you take that next step to make these kind of changes? Do you want to take this one, Carlos, or add on to what I was saying?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. It's a legitimate question. I think as a when I was in the classroom, that was that tension, and it had to be a decision I made, and just being authentic to myself as an educator, I think, is really critical. And we have this, as Laura said, this kind of notion of being on the edge, and really being true about what you believe to be right for young people. And ultimately, it's been our experiences that when your students are doing amazing things, right, and it may not be an immediate result, it takes time to get to that place, folks tend to care less about the methodology. They do. They're like, oh, well, it's working. And then it's around how do you continue to empower yourself as an educator, empower others. I mean, there's an honest tension. And I think that, as I mentioned earlier, it's important to be able to have collective voices that are engaging this. These are not one-offs. What you're doing or what someone may be trying to attempt in their classroom is not something that's not research-based. There's so much to back it up. And I think that's where we need our collective voices. Not just kind of isolations of individual schools or just individual networks of schools.
Matt, you want to?
About the leadership?
About the leadership, and then also about how you're sort of making that happen, and talked a little bit about what you're doing here at SLA.
Well, I guess from a teacher's perspective, there's a couple relevant stories that might pop up about what this power thing looks like. Maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I was teaching my students Macbeth, and I was trying to introduce this tyrant word keeps coming up, and eventually they said that they don't know what this word means. And I said, oh, well, that matters in Macbeth. And and so we went through, and I explained, and for some reason, I had the brain burst to use the relationship between a teacher and a student as an example. And because I was speaking about power, I was like, well, I have more power over you than you're willing to admit. I mean, I control whether or not you can eat, whether or not you can go to the bathroom, whether or not you can stand up, whether or not you can. I actually have an incredible amount of power, so much so that no one else will have this much power over you for the rest of your life unless you are in prison or in the military. That's what I said. It was a very clear. See, now how I handle it is you can go to the bathroom whenever you want. You can but you've been in situations where it's been wielded over you. No, you may not go relieve yourself. No, you may not eat when you're hungry or put your head down when you're sick or any of those kind of things. So, that landed immediately. But the next day, it's not about me. The next day, you know what happened. I walked into my classroom, and all of them stood up. And I had forgotten. This was like, I was just having a teachable moment. It did not stick in my brain. I'd forgotten the entire conversation. So I walk in, and the children all standing. I said, sit down, it's time. Come on, let's go. And I was like, guys, the stream's like always well behaved. I didn't know what was going on. And they're just like kids who don't act up or just have their back to me. They got their cell phones out, like, what's going on? And eventually it clicked what was happening. I moved it to a moment. I said, well, okay, I see you. It turned into a conversation about civil disobedience. I said, well, if you keep doing this, I respect you as humans and all these things. But I might have to fail you in the thing we're about to do. How do you feel about that? And it turned into this amazing conversation. Whoa, whoa, fail me. But I'm living in my power, Mr. K, like you said. I said, yes, but it's not just a free-for-all. When you walk out, when you do these kind of things, there are consequences and power. But I was thinking about that afterwards, thinking how easy it would have been of me to screw that situation up. And if I was so interested in holding on to my own image of tyrant-like image in the classroom, I might have missed what they were trying to do. They were learning. And they were dealing with, I heard someone say yesterday, the mourning of, wait a minute, this is how I've been dealt with for my entire teaching, for my entire student career, and that process was hard for them, and this was their way of dealing with it. And they collaborated. Like they got together before class, they made plans, they had roles. The other one, one kid was asleep. The other one was from this year. So I got held up on the way, bad traffic, and so I went across the street to get coffee before my class. So I was a minute or so late. And I walked in, and all of the children are asleep, like all of them. They're stretched out on my tables. They're in the back on the couches. My student teachers frumpled on the floor, asleep. And then it was a running gag. It was like, way to prove the point, don't be late, da-da-da. And we had a great laugh about it afterwards. I'm like, guys, this is right. But I remember it's like, I didn't give them permission to do that. They felt comfortable enough in their relationship with me to do that. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking, in both of these occasions, they knew, however this goes, it will not end with Mr. K ripping me. It will not end with it won't end with the assumption that I am bad. He assumes better things about me. He's going to give me a chance to breathe in this moment and act in my power. So I think those, as far as for the teachers in the room, real life examples of how to actually realize our tyrant role in the classroom. Realize we do have the potential to stop them from being human and handling their own human needs in the classroom.
That's great. I wanted to tag on to that because I know SLA does every Wednesdays the faculties get together and you share. I wonder how much that weekly check-in with other teachers has impacted you as a teacher and the other teachers to share that story with other teachers and say, I had this moment and it really worked and here's why. What could you maybe just briefly talk about the role of that weekly?
We share a lot of stories. I'm not sure if I shared those. But stuff like that. Mm-hmm. We start the faculty meetings a lot with good news and everybody sharing a lot of stories. And common planning time allows us to say, if that stream, hey, check out what this stream did. I did share it with the other stream teachers. Okay. And like, look how cool this stream is. Look what they're dealing with. You might want to check in with that during history. You might want to check in with that because they're really dealing with this whole tyrant in the classroom thing.
Right.
We might need to continue this conversation. So there are opportunities for that continued.
That's great. I'm curious here how many of you have opportunities for all your teachers to get together and share these kinds of stories and ideas collaboratively. Show of hands. Okay, not very many. Okay.
Can we pause for one? Something on Matt said
Absolutely.
I think is really
Sure.
important, and it came up in the question too, and I think it's worth thinking about in this conversation about empowerment is the role of fear. Because I think, I was listening to your story and I was thinking for some teachers that fear of losing control is, right? And so the fear of losing your job. And I guess maybe it's getting older, I think, or doing this longer, like the fear of, this is scary, right? To really try to step out of your comfort zone in ways that sometimes you don't know what's going to happen, right? Like you've given up control. But the fear of not doing it at this point has become greater for me. And so I think asking ourselves in those moments when we feel fear, what is that about, right? And forcing ourselves to pause and reflect on that first inside of ourselves and to understand like what giving up control means and how we're going to function in that environment and be able to manage a situation like that in a way that kids actually feel loved and respect it. Because I think like love is the absence of fear in a lot of ways. And so if we're acting from a place where people feel loved and empowered, what does that mean about our fear and letting go of our fear?
I've actually got one more story. With fear, with what you're saying, and I think the relationship between the administrators and the teachers, as like how this looks on the ground. I'm teaching Octavia Butler's Kindred, year 1, 21 years old or whatever, and the N-word pops up over and over and over and over and over and over throughout the text, right? And I say, well, we have read alouds, we have all sorts of stuff. Like, what am I supposed to do in this moment? Because I want the kids to feel the power to every kid, white, black, across every spectrum, to be able to participate in every conversation. So there are certain language things that need to be able to happen so that we can have larger conversations. And so I say, well, we got to have the talk about the N-word. And so I remember it wasn't like, I thought it through. I knew the different permutations of what could happen. But they walked in, I just written a slur across the board. As in a big black marker, just GG. And put it up, just as it shows up in the text. So like, you encounter this word, it's here. You see it in print, you see it on the board, you hear it when we're speaking. What are our thoughts? We journal, stuff like that. So I'm proud of myself in the way a young teacher is proud of themselves, being like revolution, whatever. I was like proud of myself. I'm like, they make movies about this kind of moment. This is great. And then Chris walks in. This is good. Chris walks in, and we talk about the relationship between my heart. It didn't just drop; it just like exploded. I don't know. And I remember I was like, "I've lost this moment. I'm going to lose this moment. This is terrible. I'm going to be on like this is bad." And the kids, and I remember when we talk about power, one of the best things I said is when I really realized I'm going to war with this dude is that he sat down on one of the tables in the back of my room and joined the conversation. And it comes down to a place of, just like I said, the kids will assume about me that I assume the best about them. It means a lot for a teacher when you know that your admin assumes the best about you. I'm not doing this for nefarious reasons. And if I'm screwing it up, you're going to need to sit there and help me so that I won't screw it up next time. But I did not mess up in trying to engage my kids.
Excellent.
And I think that's a powerful thing to remember.
That's great. That's a fantastic
If
story.
I can just add really quickly,
Yeah,
Christine.
sure.
So I think, I mean, I love the stories and the powerful stuff.
Stories.
Oh man, gotta love them. So the modeling of the school leader and demonstrating that they're all about their teachers and empowering their teachers is critical. And that, obviously we have your observations, your, kind of walkthroughs, but even in your individual conversations, one-on-ones, I think it's important. I mean, for the way I structured them as a principal was, great, I know what you're doing. Talk to me about each and every one of your kids. I want to know what they're up to, how they're doing. Like, that messaging, I think, was really important. I had great modeling, so I didn't just come up with that. That wasn't just my own brilliant idea. So my principal did it with me, and I knew I needed to do it with my teachers. So, obviously, we got to curriculum, we got to instruction, we got to, growth, but really ensuring that in those individual conversations, we were really talking about kids. And then we got to the place of how are you doing and kind of in managing all this and the supports that you need, but really starting with the students.
Great, thank you. And we have a question from Kira Baker-Doyle. She was asking, she said sharing voice is central to empowerment, so how do you build context to help all community members listen to each other? So we talked about maybe the teacher-faculty meeting, we talked about maybe reaching out to parents. Could maybe you each, Laura, you talked about community and building relationships. Do you want to talk about how specifically you do that? What is the takeaway that you could share with the audience that they could maybe model back in their districts?
Well, I think we haven't done as good of a job at, we're in our second year. We're a year and a half in, and I feel like the place where we have maybe not done the work that we need to do has been with parents. I don't think we're anywhere near where we want to be with having parents be sort of an equal player and our partner in our community and in the school. And so we've done very traditional things with parents around, meetings and progress reports, but we haven't done the work that we want to do yet around really bringing parents to understand and be a partner with us in creating what we're doing. So what I would say about that is, I think in order to move in that direction, what we've been thinking a lot about is, how do we create the spaces for those conversations to happen? So I'll give you a concrete example. We're a competency-based school. That is a very different model for parents. And I had this uncomfortable moment the other day when I had a student say to me, I love our progress reports. We sent the progress reports out around Christmas, and she said, more than one student said this, which made me think we have to do something about it. They said, I love our progress reports, and they were sent out around Christmas, and it was great because my parents don't understand them, so I didn't get in trouble. And I was like, huh. And they said, yeah, because I had to explain it to them, and it was right before the break, and so I only told them part of the story, and they didn't know enough to ask the questions. And I was like, note to self, we need to have a meeting in February. We need to bring all the parents in and not just explain it to them, but actually say, how does this become a more useful tool to you? It's just still confusing, clearly, and we're not communicating well to you information about your kids. And so how can we do that better, right? And so I think what we need to make the time for is those kinds of conversations, and then we need to be willing to make changes as a result of them. So we need to change that progress report, and we can't do it without having parents tell us what about it doesn't make sense to them and what's going to make it a more useful tool. Because we can't have kids not being able to sort of drive this conversation in a not transparent way because parents don't understand what we're doing. And so I think one of the takeaways is if you say you value it, you have to make the time for it. And then when people actually tell you things, you have to make changes based on what they tell you, or else it becomes just a perfunctory activity and people don't feel like it's worth their time because nothing changes as a result.
Parents are such a huge part of this conversation. Matt or Carlos, you want to talk about how you create specific spaces for community voice, including the parents?
Yeah. So I agree. I think it's your schedule, and if it's a priority, the fabric of your school will demonstrate that. I think for us, it's always been important to have strong parental involvement, and understanding that means really leaving kind of your traditional framework of school, of the school day. For example, authentic learning, exhibitions, presentations of learning. For us, it's important in our model that parents be as present, parents, guardians be present for those, because they actually tie into very closely to the learning plan that every student has. But recognizing that every parent can't just pick up and leave in the middle of the day to attend an exhibition. So they have to happen at a variety of different spaces, which may include the parent's home, where those happen. Which, recognizing it's not easy, but for us it's just straight up a priority. And for us, it's like we're unapologetic about it, pretty relentless. But it's about being being flexible and nimble enough, where those priorities have a clear space within your school. Also, in terms of conversations for the variety of stakeholders, there's this, we meet a lot. Like, teachers have grade level meetings. They meet across the entire faculty, meet individual meetings with principals, meetings with internship coordinators. So there's constant meetings, but it's actually pretty necessary to ensure that everyone's on the same page. So might be a little frustrating at times, but I think if you're really going to serve your students well, being very well informed, those conversations and that space for that is essential.
And Matt, I know there's a program in Philly that you have like a mentor teacher that has a group of kids that works with the parents, and maybe I'm making this up. How do you work with parents?
There is. I'm not as familiar with
Okay.
that as how do I work with?
Well, so how does SLA
Wait,
work with
are you talking about advisory?
advisory? Yes, that's
Oh.
what we're talking about.
then yes. I'm
Thank
very
you.
familiar with it.
Mentor, advisor, sorry.
Even there's a program in Philly, I'm like, oh. Yes, I do know advisors.
And the parents are involved with that too, right?
Yeah.
With, okay, thanks. Thanks for clarifying.
We have everyone on our staff is responsible for being the lead advocate for 20. I don't know quite how many students. 20, 21, and I'm sure you've heard about it over the course of yesterday. But the brief of it is you stay with them over 4 years, and you're their first point of contact. Not by any stretch of the imagination the only point of contact, but it's someone who has a longitudinal relationship with your kid. They've known that they knew them in 9th grade and 10th grade, so that problem they're having in 11th grade might have some context that the teacher doesn't know. And so you're skipping a lot of the unnecessary stuff that happens at Meet the Teacher or whatever, where they're like, this kid seems to be always sad when we mention this. Now we know. Or this, or it just saves a lot of time. And also this parent knows, they don't have to get to know. They get to know every year, but there's a relationship that they have in the school. It's like a school parent. And it's like, and when they're upset, they come to you. When they're happy, they come to you. When they graduate, they shake your hand. They know they have a lead advocate among the many advocates that's in the building. So if that's what you're talking about.
Yes, I was thinking that you engage parents in that way. Then, do your schools have similar models where you reach out to parents, show of hands? Anyone have a similar model in place? Not very many. Okay. Good. Let's see. Oh gosh, I lost the question. The feed's going crazy. The gist of it was, what do you do when you have a leader in place who says he supports this kind of model but isn't necessarily modeling it? I don't know who's going to take that one, but well, Matt, you're exempt, so.
Good.
Unless you
start. I would feel more empowered if I didn't have to always go first.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, Laura. I'm sorry.
Thanks, Laura.
He sat on that end intentionally, too.
Yeah. It happens often, where the kind of the talk isn't the walk. And I think it's around having those frank, honest conversations and bringing it to their attention. And, I'm assuming that oftentimes as an educator, you may not feel like you're the only one that feels that way, but the power of collective voices. Just speaking from a personal experience, when I was a principal, there were a couple of, just kind of going 100 miles an hour, and a couple of my staff felt very strongly about a couple of decisions I was making where I wasn't really involving them, where I was just kind of going, and I was like, with the best of intention, believe me, it was best of intention, but where I wasn't consulting with them and saying, hey, what do you guys think about this? Again, a staff that historically has always been empowered around almost every decision made about the school. And really, they brought it to my attention, and it was a very real moment, a teachable moment even for an administrator, because we need those teachable moments as well. And really calling those out whenever they happen. And I know it's challenging. It's around the piece around operating with fear, but it's really about what are you willing to fight for, and what are you willing to stand up for. Because your students deserve it, right? Ultimately they're the ones that pay the price for it. So I think it's really important to be able to figure out what's that courage kind of lever, the collective voices that agree, and then bringing it in a respectful way. Also with solutions, I think for me is always that, we have those conversations. What ideas do you guys have? I think, the whole notion of the squeaky wheel, right, it's true, but it's harder to hear it when there isn't some kind of like WD-40 coming along with it, right? Like I want to hear what are some additional solutions? What ideas do you have that might be helpful?
Mm-hmm. I would imagine that it's not too different from what I described for the classroom with rubrics, that your words probably don't mean as much if they don't come linked to systems that are going to hold you accountable to them. and enough shared language so that everyone can hold you accountable. And so I would be wary, though I have not experienced it, I would be wary of any leader who spoke deeply about empowerment. And it's not just about wasn't willing to do the work, because there's a lot of people of goodwill who are willing to do work. It's are they willing to be held accountable to see if the thing is working? I think that's a very big difference than are they willing to work. Like if you, for example, say that you are going to have some manner of student government council, something that's going to show kids the power of their voices, and what are the checks and balances? How are you going to reflect on that real time? And I think that's the standard we can hold. I don't really like the value judgment of like folks, they're all talk, no action, that kind of stuff, because I think that's an easy way for us to feel better than other people. But I think the real issue is do they, in presenting a new initiative, also say how we're going to reflect on whether that initiative is working, and then give you the power to change it, or show you that you have the power to change it if it is not working, if your reflection shows otherwise. So I think that might be, for leaders, that's the thing to remember. What are your accountability systems? How public are you being about that for your teachers and your kids? Can your kids hold you accountable? It's like, yo, I don't feel safe in this building. Can they walk up to you and say that? Or is the building safe so they don't have permission to say that they feel otherwise?
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, if you start off, and there's always outliers, okay? So I'm not talking about the outliers, the people who actually should not be in those jobs, right? And there are always people like that. But I think there are more people that don't have all the answers and don't necessarily know the way forward and get afraid, because leaders, I think, are seen as people who should have answers. And so being able to be in an environment where you're going to let your leader learn, right, is also something I think that that teachers and other folks in the building have to reflect on, because that is not something people let leaders do very often, right? And there's a lot of judgment, I think, that comes into play when a leader admits that they don't know and they have to learn, and it makes people uncomfortable, right? But if we're talking about asking teachers to transfer power to students in the same way that can be uncomfortable for a teacher, that's how it feels to be that leader who wants that same space, right? So I think it's start off by assuming best intent, and then think about what that dynamic is from both sides and what the right step forward would be in creating a safe space for the leader to learn, and what role teachers have in helping to create that kind of a culture in a building. Because we always say to kids, culture gets created by all of us, right? The decisions that you make as students every day are part of how culture gets created. Same with teachers, same with leaders, right? Culture gets created by everybody. And I think sometimes we put that unduly on one single person in a building. So I would offer that as something to think about.
Great, thank you. So I'm thinking a takeaway. Okay, we've got a lot of folks in the room who have, or sounds like they're looking for opportunities to student empowerment, teacher empowerment. Thinking in terms of your work, what would you say was probably one most important thing that you did when you first got started in making change in schools that was effective? And it could be one or two. I'm just thinking, was it starting to host faculty meetings? Was it hosting parent groups? Was there kind of one shift moment in your careers that you saw make a difference? And I'll throw this out to any of you who would like to take this on. What can they do on Monday that might be able to make a difference? Let's stump them.
So I started going out with my staff on Fridays on a regular basis after work. Felt like that needed to be, again, kind of like this other layer of relationship building with my staff when I was a school leader. And some of the most brilliant ideas that then became implemented in our school happened during what we call the Unity Unwind on Fridays, over a beer, over a glass of wine, and no pressure. If you can make it, great, understanding people have different obligations, but over time we saw just so many more folks kind of constantly attending. At some point it was, became every other Friday, but just that space for relationship building was really essential. I think also the additional spaces for parents to be involved within the fabric of the school, not just here, you can get in here, but here's an open kind of space, on a regular basis where parents come in and really doing the outreach necessary to ensure that every parent is aware and knows that this is happening, remaining flexible to schedules, and not everything being around just sharing information and content, but even building those relationships with parents within the fabric of your school. So we'd go bowling, there was always kind of a more content-specific conversation, but then also something that was more kind of recreational and just kind of like a chill out, unwind with parents as well, and families.
That's a great idea. Matt?
So many things in the classroom, but I had to step outside the classroom for this one. I started a slam poetry league in the city. And, if you're from Philly, please leave with one of these cards and we can talk about that. But I wanted a space where kids had, because, I can tell, I've been pretty good right now, but I have a pretty bad stutter sometimes. And I had it really bad when I was a little kid. And speaking in front of people developed my confidence so much that I said, I've got to, whatever I do in life, that has got to be, if it's not my main job, I have to dedicate a good portion of my life to making sure that kids like me can get what I got. And so we started a slam poetry league. It had 5 schools, and now it has 20 across the city. And they compete every Friday afternoon. And I think one of the most beautiful things about it that I've done, why it counts here, and when it says, showing the power of their own voices, is that we give them a microphone, we give them an audience, and then we get out of the way. And whatever they say, it matters a great deal. And the last thing they hear when they leave the stage is applause. And how many of us get that? And I think that has affected my teaching practice so much when I find out how powerful it is to just, I'm important. I am the teacher in the room. I'm not so lefty that I think that I have no importance in the room, but I also understand that how often can I get out of the way and let them just be brilliant? And I think that's one of the best things that I have done, and that, more importantly than me, that all of the coaches in my league have done for their kids. They give them an opportunity to be heard. So I think if there is a takeaway, how many opportunities are you giving your students to be heard if you say you believe in their power?
Excellent. Thank you.
I think in the last 5 years, the biggest change for me, or the thing that I think about the most, I had a privilege of going to a pretty amazing doctoral program for 3 years, and the program had a saying that has really stuck with me, which was, you can't transform the sector until you transform yourself. And so a huge part of that doctoral program was what they called adult development. And it was a mirror that was held up in front of you for 3 years, pretty much. And it was a place where people had permission to kind of talk to you constantly about what you were seeing, what they were seeing, and how to become a better leader. And I think what I've changed about my leadership as a result of that has been starting with self. And I realized something about myself, which was that I had a lot of assumptions. I had running narratives in my head that were unchecked. And my behavior then was a result of the narrative and the assumption that I had in my head. And so I would say the first thing you can do is get curious, ask questions, check assumptions, think about the patterns that you're stuck in and what are those patterns about, and look inward first to think about what it is that is keeping some of those systems that aren't empowering in place. But just get very curious and not see it as judgmental, but ask honest questions and be willing to hear the answers.
Thank you. I think we're going to end a little early, give you time for coffee and transition to the next conversation. Please help me welcome this panel. They've been terrific on a very big topic. All right. Thank you so much. Enjoy your day.